Okay, welcome everybody. We are here to talk about community living, and we'll go through our presentation. At the end, we will definitely save at least 10 minutes to have discussion. And so I am going to start by introducing myself. I am Mary Haase. I am an occupational therapist, actually, and I also run a nonprofit for young people with disabilities. But I'm a parent, and most of all, I want all of you to know that I'm a parent, and I've been at this for 30 years, and really working on advocating for my son with autism, and who is now 28. And so as you listen to us speak and share, I just want you to make sure that you know that where I'm coming from. What I'm coming to share with you is that I just had a mission, and I wanted to advocate, and I wanted the best future for my son. I was also in the schools for 27 years, so I also was an advocate for all the students and wanted the best future for them. So realistically, I'm on both sides of the spectrum there. Anything else? I do run a nonprofit called Haase Community Connections out of Mugwanago, and I started that. I left my job after 30 years and decided to run an instructional day services program for young adults with disabilities so that there would be a bridge between school and life. And I guess that's why I think most of us are here, is to make sure that there is a bridge, that there is a future, that it's positive, wonderful, meaningful, and all those things. And I'll share more with you about the Haase House. And I think advocacy is the other piece for me that I think every time you have an opportunity, I say go for it. Go listen, learn something new, jump in, speak, say something important that's on your mind, and don't hold back. All right.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bertram, and I too am a parent. I have two adult children. One is Lindsay, who is an RN, and Megan, who I advocate for, and I've been advocating for her on the national level for epilepsy for 24 years this February. And so I've had a lot of hats, and we, with three other dynamic women, have started something called Inclusive Living Possibilities. And some of you may have gotten a handout. I did not make as many handouts as I should have. So if anyone wants that, you can just take a snapshot of it, or I'm happy to email it to you. But what we are about, because my daughter has severe epilepsy that's not controlled, she has no verbal speech out of her mouth. She can spell and requires a lot of help with day-to-day. Our living options are very non-existent, good ones. And so we really wanted to create a community, not just like a house, a place to live, a community where we're stimulating, educational, and she would be passionate about living there when I'm gone. And that's a scary thing for parents to be talking about, but it's really, really important to be educated about it and also to be prepared. So if you want to know more about inclusive living possibilities, you can message me and we can get you information on that.
Hi, and I'm Julie Burish. I'm a parent. I have, my daughter Catherine has Down syndrome, and she's 27, almost 28. And I got on the advocacy bandwagon from pretty much the minute she was born. You know, we didn't know about Down syndrome. We didn't know about cognitive disabilities, mental disabilities, but we did know one thing, that we wanted her life to look as much like her brother's as possible. We knew from day one that she is going to accomplish everything she possibly can, and that she's going to run her life. We're going to follow her lead, just like we did with our son. I have a son who's 2.5 years older, and that just kind of set me on my path. Since then, you know, I'm a huge advocate. I sit on tons of state councils and things like that. I've become a partner in policymaking. I have a really great relationship with our school district. My cohort of parents were the ones who really moved our school district into an inclusive school district. And so basically, you know, I can go on and on, but we're going to talk about Catherine's journey to housing, because there really basically is no housing. But Catherine like I said, she's going to be 28, she's 27, she's lived in her own apartment pretty independently for the last, it's 5 years, going on 6 years. So that's what we want to share with all of you, parents and educators and people who provide services and work with people with disabilities. It's about, having that expectation, okay? All right, so then we're going to do this. Okay, that's us. Oh, by the way, Patti Becker, she was going to be here, and she had a situation that she couldn't make it, so she's not going to be here. Okay, I'm just going to go over history a little bit. This is a quick slide. The gentleman up on top, he's a man with a wig. He's a founding father. His name is Stephen Hopkins. He was the governor of Rhode Island. He was the Chief Justice on the Rhode Island Supreme Court, and he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. But he was also an individual with cerebral palsy. And he signed the Declaration of Independence, and his quote was, "My hand trembles, but my heart does not." So, think about that. When we were colonies, this man was seen as an individual that was intelligent and everything. Then we go down, that is a picture of an institution. By the mid-1800s, this is what happened. This is where they put people that were feeble-minded. This is where men could send their wives. If they thought their wives were hysterical or whatever, they would send them here. Then in 1975, the Supreme Court decided that people with disabilities, children with disabilities, deserved an education. And once that happened, parents said, yeah, my kids can go to school, they don't need to go to an institution. And that started the revolution. And then we had the civil rights movement and everything. And now here we are, and people with disabilities, I think we all see them as being people, right? And that they should be in the community, but we haven't realized that. We don't have a lot of good options for people in the community. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, one of the things, how are things funded in Wisconsin today? Those of you who are dealing with school-age children, when a child or a student, a self-advocate, I prefer to call people self-advocates, when they're in school, school is responsible for providing all their services during the school day, okay? So all their programming, their transportation, meds, whatever they need is provided there. There's a children's long-term care waiver that can provide some supports, but once somebody leaves school at 21, well, actually at 18, they have access to Medicaid long-term care, and that would be IRIS, which is the self-directed long-term care program, and or family care. And family care is an HMO, and it's managed care. There are different waivers in the legacy. Some of the legacy waivers are things like the children's long-term care waiver and stuff like that. And then, of course, if families have lots of money, which most families don't, they could private pay this, right? They could use private funds. The next one.
Okay, do you have any questions so far? Anyone? Yes? A legacy waiver?
All of our waivers for the long-term care and everything, those are all legacy waivers, but there's a whole bunch. There's children's long-term care legacy waiver. There's a whole bunch of them, but they're mandated, they're in statute that they're there, that they're there to provide services. It's really hard, right? It's hard for people to know. But one of the resources is
Yeah, Katie Beckett. That's what I was going to say.
for under 18, but the EDRC, so every county has an EDRC, which is an aging and disability resource. That's pretty much the place to go to help you with any kind of benefit.
Do you want to say anything?
No, is there anything else about that? Katie Beckett. Okay. Yeah, Katie Beckett. That is something that when a child is born with a disability, they can utilize, it's a Medicaid waiver, but it is based on disability, not on income. So when a child is born and they're diagnosed with, like for example, with my daughter, Catherine, with Down syndrome, that was the first thing we got. This first thing, the hospital wouldn't even let us out until we filled out paperwork for Katie Beckett. And then that covers all of her therapies. You know, that's how Birth to 3 is funded. That's how any additional supports a child needs. So those are legacy waivers too.
Okay, thank you. All right, we are going to kind of go over right now. There are living options in Wisconsin, and this slide right here is just displaying all that are available. So we start with, where do people with disabilities live? And where do they live? They can live with their family, which the percentage is very high. Adult family homes. And adult family homes basically are when people live in a home that is owned by a care provider. So if I want to have a home and I want to have 3 people live there and I own the home, it is an adult family home, and then I can use their funds to help support them. They usually have 1 to 4 people. The next one is agency-owned supported apartment programs, and basically the person uses an apartment that they're renting from an agency, and the agency provides the services, all the supports that are needed, coordinates that. The group homes or adult family homes that are corporate, a person could live in this home that is run by a business, and it provides them their care, and this would be 1 to 8 people living there. Would that be a CBRF? That would be a CBRF, certified. Also, some of our people with disabilities live in nursing homes where they may have a bed in a private room. The staff, it's staffed by those who own the nursing home and the operator of that nursing home. So they run it and they staff it and they provide all the services.
This is a very, very expensive option. It's typically about $250,000 a year for a nursing home that people have very little say over what their life looks like.
Okay, and we also have state institutions that are run by the state for short-term or long-term support. Do we still have? We still have Southern Center in Union Grove. I actually volunteered there when I was an OT student. But also I went to the one in Madison when some of my students had some really severe needs, and they were had some short-term support there, and I went there to work with therapists and the care team. And the last but not least is what we're all here to hear about today, is community-supported living. And this basically is what it sounds like. Living in the community, being part of the community. And we look at this and it is really something that we're creating based on the home and community-based settings final rule legislation. And that was in 2014? About 2014. When I created my nonprofit, I actually knew about the home and community-based settings legislation before it came to our state. And it really was prompting me to not have the group home that rocks, which is what I wanted to call it. I didn't want that. And then I thought, well, what about the adult family home? But then how do I reach other people? And so when I started studying the home and community-based settings final rule legislation, it really is about community, integration, inclusion, having everyone belong, having everyone work in a community, have choices, have voices, have a life. And so that's basically the premise of the community-supported living. Other way.
All right, what is community-supported living? It looks like a lot of different things, but basically it's a flexible partnership between the person needing support to live on their own, in their own home, and an entity that provides services. And that can be, we'll go through, we have another slide, but You know, that can be anything. That can be paid support, that could be unpaid support, it can be natural support, and it can come from agencies. If you use the IRIS program, you can hire your own workers. So then you can hire and train your own workers, support people. Okay, Mary, did you want to handle this one? This is where everyone should live. Sure. Patty was going to be our main person here.
All right, so kind of now that you have an idea of the community-supported living and the premise behind it being self-determined, choice, voice, belonging, those kinds of things. What I really want to focus in on here is this is a slide that we've all worked on, we've all created, because if you take away almost anything from today, if you want to leave today and you want to make a difference or make a change or approach things in a different manner, these would be the kind of truths, beliefs, philosophies, words to live by, things that I think brought all of us here and the parents and the agencies and the boards that we work with. This is where a lot of it stems from. So everyone, every person, and this applies to everyone, this is not just people with disabilities, but everyone should live in a community that's connected, safe, a safe home, and that they control. So if you keep that premise in your mind, if you're a teacher or you're a parent, when you're trying to advocate or ask for something, that's what you keep in mind. They have their home that is personalized, dictated by their choices, and it upholds their dignity. Do you have any examples of that, actually? I'm wondering if you guys have an example to throw out for that. And also they need to control and choose who provides them services. So think about yourself. If you were injured and handicapped tomorrow, would you want someone to choose things for you, or would you want to choose? And that applies to everybody. Anything else?
Yeah. And also, you think about it, we all need supports, right? Everybody needs supports. You know, your appliance breaks. You need somebody to come and fix it, right? Does somebody tell you who's going to come and fix it? No. You get to determine, I like this particular person that works on my stuff. It's the same concept for people with disabilities. They might need help finding those things, but that they should have final choice over who touches them, who's in their room, who helps them do things.
So my daughter does not speak out of her mouth. And when we interview caregivers and support staff, she spells out and interviews them as well. So she asks them things. The last time she interviewed someone, she asked them if they had any pets, because that was important to her, and how old they were. That was important to her. She wanted someone that was her age and she could really connect with. So that's some like real examples of how you can get your person, even with capacity to not even be able to talk out of your mouth, that you can be centered in their approach.
And I think the word that we're missing here is self-direction. So if you looked at the funding sources, there would be IRIS and there would be family care, and they have self-directed routes within their funding. Is that a good way to put that? Mm-hmm. And so self-direction, as a parent for me, when I had to find a caregiver for my son who would finish middle school and who would have nothing to do except sit home after school every day, which is what most every one of his friends did as well, who was going to watch him. Well, he didn't want the same person that was at school to sit and watch him. He didn't want grandma to watch him. He wanted Peyton, because Peyton was cool. Peyton was on the volleyball team. Peyton was on prom court. Peyton lived down the street. Peyton played Little League with him, things like that. And so with the self-directed route, I was able to make sure that I could find somebody that made my son's time after school positive and enriching for him. So, supports are not controlled by the place you live. You don't have to move if you choose to have a different support provider. So, that's what you.
Yeah, now that is when we talked about the different types of housing there is available for people. Many of the types of housing group homes, adult family homes, you can only live there if you accept the supports that are being provided to you by that provider. And when you think about human dignity, that's maybe not the most dignified way to live, right? So our premise with talking about community living, supported community living, is the person's in the driver's seat. This should be person-centered, and people should choose. So if you choose, you should choose where you want to live, right? You should decorate your place the way you would like it decorated. It should meet your needs. And when you need support, you should choose who comes into your house and who supports you. And if that person doesn't meet your needs, you don't like the way they talk to you, you don't like anything about them, you shouldn't have to move because you don't feel safe or comfortable, or that's just not your person. You should be able to choose. And unfortunately, for so many people, that is just not an option because we don't have a lot of really good housing options at this time. And community living is in the community and surrounded by neighbors of all abilities, okay? There is, we've all been trained with senior housing, for example, that people get to a certain point in their life and they all get siloed and they live in a community where they're all the same, right? And that is a method and that is a model that's been used for a century for people with disabilities. And since the 70s, we've been trying to change that and to get people in the community. But unfortunately, we haven't gotten very far since the 70s. And us here as parents, there are groups of parents that are really pushing to change this, okay? And then allows for creativity. Yeah, we've kind of talked about this.
Staff and natural supports provide all the support that's needed. And so when we talk about community supported living, it doesn't mean like a place. You should have your own place. You should be able to call it your own. If you need 1 hour of service in the whole week to support you, that's what the long-term care funding there is for. If you need up to 24/7, you still can have a place of your own. And so that's something that I think it's kind of a myth, that I think people who have young adults or children who have some quite special needs, I don't think it's easy to envision that they could actually have an apartment or have a home with 3 other people and have support there 24/7. And that's where the creativity piece comes in. There's no required functional level of ability. So when you're thinking about someone going into maybe an adult family home or a group home, think about that. Sometimes it depends on if they can work with that disability or that person. But if you're looking at having a place of their own, to call their own, sign their own lease, sign their own mortgage, and have all the supports in the world, they don't have to be fit to anything. Their IQ doesn't matter, their physical disability, their health, their physical health, mental health. And that's what community supported living is. Individuals have control over when, what, where you sleep, where you eat, and where you use the bathroom. So that's the bottom line of it. And I know it sounds funny, but it's very true. Think about yourself today, and think about how you'd feel.
And a check for when you are looking for housing situations. If you are a professional and you're talking to families, if you're a parent and you're looking for places, right there, that is the one thing, are they going to be told when to go to bed? Are they going to be given one choice or maybe 2 choices on a Friday night, which van they take to go do whatever? They don't get to choose. Those are the things. That tells you that this is not a person-centered living situation, right? And it takes work to build support around a person, but if we can do it and make it sustainable, it's the way everybody should live, right? Everybody should live a dignified life that way.
This is the next slide.
Okay, this is mine.
Yep.
Okay, this was kind of my road. The big problem is when we were looking for a place for our daughter to live, there's no affordable housing. We live in a suburb where it's supposedly an aspirational place to live, right? You know, our community doesn't want to have affordable housing because they figure you could go live in a less aspirational place until you can afford to move to our suburb. You know, I've been working, like I said, I've been working at this for years, and even though my daughter has a place to live, it's my passion. And I work with the school district. I'm still really involved with the school district, you know, getting them to really look at, you know, enabling people to live more independent lives. So what I did is I looked at, they're just building so many units out by us, but they're anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a unit. And what our community does is they require the square footage to be so large that there's no way it can be an affordable house, you know, because it's 1,000 square feet. Where, you know, my daughter could very easily live in a 450 square foot apartment. You know, and that could be even at market rate, that could be affordable maybe. But anyway, what I did is I decided, okay, I'm gonna build an argument here. So I called the school district and I said, how many kids, how many students, self-advocates with IEPs have you graduated in the last 10 years? And they weren't able to give me 10 years, but for 8 years. Our school district graduated 360 students with IEPs. How many affordable units are there in our community? Where do those people go, right? They're living at home with their parents. Or they're moving to one of those less aspirational communities away from all of their supports, away from everybody they know, away from the businesses they know and everything, okay? So that's what they do. They end up leaving. You know, Catherine's friends, she has a lot of them that live in surrounding communities. Most of them are not walkable. They don't know anybody. Some of them go to congregate settings. That is one thing that we have a few of, is we have a few adult family homes in our community, and we have a few group homes. But for most people, especially when we have the school district, that we've all advocated to be inclusive. Most of our students in our school district work in the community. They really value employment, so they have jobs in the community, but they have no place to live. And where do most of them stay? Most of them stay with their families. Some of the families set up something in their house, maybe in the basement, where they have like a little apartment or something. But what the problem is, and this is the chronic problem everywhere in the country and in our state, is that people with disabilities are living with their parents until their parents are 85 years old and die, and then what happens to them? They go to a sibling, or they end up in a group home, which is terrible, and they have to live in a way that they're not used to living, and that's just not great. But there just aren't any very good options. So one of the things that I think is really important is to act locally. Most housing is not done on a state level or a national level. It's done on a community level. It's done based on your municipality. So you need to get involved. I'm going to skip down. One of the things you need to do is find allies. Other groups of parents, find people with power. What is your alderperson? How do they feel about this? And by the way, get your legislators, your alder people to know your child. Invite them to their job. Invite them to things. Invite them to the school so that they have a relationship with your person. Groups of families, faith groups, teachers and staff, school administrators are great advocates for your community to talk about community housing. And then what I've learned is that when you find out about a development being built in your community, oh, there's going to be a 200-unit lovely apartment. And you think, wow, I'm going to, call that developer and I'm going to say, hey, do you want to put some, subsidized housing for people with disabilities? It would be really great. That's way too late. It's way too late because they already have the plans, they have their financing, they have everything is taken care of, and there's no way that's going to happen. So that's why when you have allies, like I have an ally who's an alderperson who's also on our planning commission, he lets me know when there's a new project that someone's sniffing around about. Oh, there's this piece of property over here, and we have 2 developers that are looking at it. And you know, this, you have to get in on the ground floor. And one of the things I've found too is that if a developer comes in to build something and they're not going to ask for any TIF money, which is tax incremental funding, which means the municipality comes in and gives them a tax credit for building, or they put in water, roads, whatever. If they are asking for TIF money, the community can say, okay, we're going to give you this money, but then we have these requirements. So you kind of want to find a development where they're going to be asking for TIF money, because if you have allies on the planning commission, that's one thing that they can advocate for is, okay, you can build a 200-unit thing, but we want you to put in 10% of some Section 8 housing, and then they can find their financing for that.
You got a question over there?
Yes.
My question is, because I kind of confused you with this, how do you get the developers to continue on once their contract with the funding expires? Because that is a very temporary thing. So
It is.
that expires and jack those prices and forget that ever happened.
But see, that's where if you get it designated, and I think Haase back here could probably get it, but if
Haase is
it's like if it's section 42, section 8. But some of them, they can make a requirement that's 30 years or a number of years. And those are the things, when you have a developer, right, that's what you want them to do is commit. No, it's different. Some of them can be 30 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's different.
Technically, if you're a for-profit developer, you can actually change it in 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why it's important to go with a nonprofit developer.
Yep. And you can get a nonprofit developer to work with the for-profit developer to hold some of those apartments. There's a group in Madison called Moving Out, and that's what they do. They don't always build the big complexes, but what they do is they get in on the ground floor and they say, we're going to take 25 of those units. And then they get the funding and the financing, and they designate those. And then those are usually 30-year housing. That was a long slide.
Does anyone have a pressing question right now? Anything we? Okay. So just to kind of bring you back to the community-supported living, this is just a simple slide for you to reference. If you look at the left-hand column, if you were in something that was not community-supported living, the provider owns the residence, the provider schedules your day, and the provider determines your services. If you start thinking in terms of advocating for community-supported living, the person can have a place to call their own. They have their own schedules of their own day, following what they are self-determined and what they desire to do with their life. And the person also determines the services that they need. So it just varies by person to person what their profile will look like as far as their support services. And so the benefits of supported living would be that they have a freedom to change their providers. And I think that's the key. My mom is 95 years old, and she has somebody who came in to do to be her caregiver, and the caregiver would walk in the house and talk to her like she was 2 and tell me everything and not let my mom speak at all. And my mom is bright. She's still with it. And I could see my mom cringe every time the caregiver said a word. So I had to come in and do some teaching because I felt like she just went from an independent life, raising 10 children, 38 grandchildren, and now she's 95, and now someone's going to tell her what to do. And so that's what the freedom is about. A real self-directed, meaningful community life. And so again, if you can design your own support services, if you want to go to watch the Packer game at the bowling alley, that's what you set up your support service to do. If you want to go do board games at someone's house or anything like that, you can help dictate that rather than let's all go to this one movie and everybody's going to like that genre of a movie. That's kind of a simple example. Supported living also, the services match you, they don't match the services. Just like in the schools, you don't fit a student to a program.
Okay, ooh, geez, just blinded myself. Relationships and living. We all have relationships, and I look at this picture, and it kind of brings me back to when my kids were this age, and my whole world was them, and I was their whole world, right? And as parents, we want to kind of just keep them that way our whole life. And what I really encourage is that we have to develop relationships in our communities, like this holding hands picture. So, I actually want you to think about who are the people that you have relationships with. You have relationships, obviously, with your family, maybe friends, coworkers, the school. If your student is in school, they're school-aged. You may be in faith-based type of experiences, social clubs and things. But if you haven't been getting out in the community and living so people can see you, that's your homework. Get out there because the community needs to see you with your student in whatever capacity they can function. And they need to be part of the community as well. And making those connections are incredibly important. And thinking about how you want your student to fill up their day in the future. So just future planning is so important to start when they're young. Because I know for me, I would go back and say, boy, I would have done it different. I'll tell you one thing that really impacted our lives a lot was having someone a little ahead of me in the journey. Okay? Find that person that is maybe 2, 3, 5 years ahead of you. And I'll give you just one example is that I had a friend, and my daughter, Megan, was going to be going to high school, and she went to Arrowhead. It was a huge, huge undertaking. So every week in the summertime, I got permission to go in the school, walk her around, take pictures, do a PowerPoint, do social stories, so that she would know exactly where she was going. And I'll tell you, when she walked into that place, she owned it. And I'll tell you, it was all because we had done the work ahead of time, and she felt confident, and I felt great. And I'm sure the teachers felt great because she already kind of knew where she was going. But this friend, a friend that was a little ahead of me, she's been very impactful in epilepsy with me. We've been friends for a long time. And she said, have Megan take one regular ed class every semester. And now I am a therapist. I'm a goal-oriented person. And I've always been looking ahead. What's the next thing I'm going to do? But sometimes as parents, we need that little nudge. And this person really impacted me. And I hadn't really even thought that she would take a regular ed class, to be honest, if I'm being really transparent right now. And that really impacted her. It not only impacted her as academia, that she could do it. We were still dealing with a lot of, because remember, she doesn't talk out of her mouth, so she can't communicate really effectively. It really impacted the school. Like, we got to figure out some things. And they could see what she could do, what her challenges were. But guess who it really impacted? The students. I have students come back to me and say, I changed my whole career because I saw Megan in that class. I have teachers come back to me and say, wow, now I know what you were talking about all these years. Anyways, so that one person can make that difference. So we talk about communities and connections. We know our communities, they really want to circle us. They want to give us a big hug. They really don't have a lot of idea how to do that. And so we really have to make those connections. So, with the parents in the room and the other professionals and educators, that person that you're supporting in the center, we want to get out there and be part of communities and make those connections. Perfect example is a handful of years ago, her sister decided that she should like coffee, because every teenager and 20-year-old loves coffee now, and that's a fun thing, and became kind of a fun social activity for her and her sibling, because we're limited of what she can and cannot do. So we started doing that. We went to our local coffee shop. Fast forward now, she walks into that coffee shop and they know who she is. They know what kind of coffee she drinks. Oh, it's Megan. And she usually screams when she comes into the coffee shop because she is that excited. That's what belonging feels like, that your community knows you. I mean, don't we all want to be known and belong and have a purpose? And whatever that looks like for your student or for your self-advocate, those are the kind of connections that we have to go out of our comfort zone, and we got to try things, and it's scary, and it's a lot of effort, but that's what we need to do. This kind of is a nice slide to kind of pull it all together, looking at all our different community members with your individual in the middle, of all the different places that you can make connections with, you can have relationships with, and I think importantly, what is going to rock your student's world or your self-advocate's world? I'll tell you what happened to us. Megan's had tens of thousands of seizures. She should not really be here today, but because of our hard work with medical staff and a lot of sleepless nights, we still have her by God's grace. And this art teacher decided in elementary school that this piece of art that she made was really unique. And so she put it in the high school library. Okay, I'm not an artist, and I didn't really have an appreciation for this at that moment. But I'll tell you what it did. It made a spark in my head like, that's interesting. She really likes to make things. So I need to look at that, because at this time, what you don't know is that Megan was losing function because her epilepsy was so bad. She was losing the ability to use her hands. She was losing things that she couldn't do. And so we were really struggling in a lot of different ways. To see this spark was like, okay, I'm going to hold on to that. So we started doing more crafting at home. I started taking her to social opportunities and recreational programs at the YMCA. She got involved in church activities where she could do some volunteering, which was a lot of fine motor, using her hands types of activities. And she was really drawn to it. And we started doing a lot more. Her caregiver does a lot of those things. Now, we always are coming up with new activities. A month ago, I ran into an experience at Zacharias Acres in Economwalk, where they do they do family events for families like ours. And they had a teacher there that was doing art. And so I hired her as a private artist to come into my home as an art teacher. That's what that one moment did back in elementary school. So be a detective for your students, whether you're an educator or a parent. Be watching. What are they drawn to? What are they really into? Talk about housing early, like, where would you like to live? Hey, talk out loud. Give them ideas, but also listen and watch. If you have a person that has more challenges, they don't talk with their mouth, or they have behaviors, or they have other challenges, you have to be a really good detective. And you got to really watch. And that one thing, and that's why those social connections of communities are so critical, because another person might actually mention something. And always listen, and always take to heart and try it, because you don't know that one thing and what that's going to bridge, that gap is going to bridge. The one other thing that I want to talk about is safety that I missed. When I think safety, for me, just because of my experiences, I think about public safety. So when we moved to Merton, Megan was having a lot of seizures. And so the first thing I thought of is I need to connect with the fire and the police department because I want them to know my kid. Whether you have a potential of a crisis of mental health or behaviors or anything like that, this is a fantastic idea for a lot of reasons. For the obvious, when they get into your home, if you're in a crisis, they already know your kids. So you can like create a profile. I know there's programs out there. Every community kind of has a different approach to it. But what we did was we just did a one-pager, and we would put her picture, things to do. Her epilepsy obviously was the number one thing, but she also doesn't talk out of her mouth, remember? And so knowing how to communicate with her was important. She does have behaviors. In epilepsy, there's a lot of nuances with each person. So going to your fire and police department so they know what your kid looks like, how to handle it, then guess what? I broke my arm. So I couldn't do an emergency medication that I had to do, so I had to call the paramedics in to do that for me because I couldn't physically do it. But guess what? They already knew my kid, and I already knew them. So we had a relationship. So you see how important all those things are. So looking ahead, being proactive, getting in your community and talking, and having a community around you is going to behoove everyone. Mostly your student, but it's also going to behoove all the people around you.
Okay, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what she was saying. First of all, I want to talk a little bit more about being connected because she has a lot of personal, why not? Because basically if we're going to do community supported living, it does start with that. And I have, on the bottom it says when to start was yesterday. I started my active adventure for getting my son prepared for his future when he was in second grade. When he loved going to the Catholic Church and seeing the priest sit on his fancy big chair. And I decided that maybe he could start his supported employment. And he got his new volunteer job to clean Father's chair and wear his little backpack that was like a Ghostbuster vacuum backpack. And the secretary at church gave him a walkie-talkie, and so when he was done, he could call her back and tell her that he was done with his job. And ever since second grade, he knew the value of working and doing something good for someone else. And I think all of us here who do work know that there's a great value in work. And so I started advocating in that way for my son. I also had him do a little t-ball. I had him do a little tennis camp. And what ended up happening was he ended up playing on Special Olympics volleyball, but also being part of the high school volleyball team. He played, and he then became a manager his senior year. He also played on the tennis team, and this tennis coach would talk to other school districts that came and would find their player that really was weak and didn't want to get obliterated off the court either, and they would set up matches for my son to play somebody on their team. And I have to say that connection of those kinds of little things that I've done are what make up everything. He's been to 3 weddings, and we are going to Peyton's wedding next week is the one I talked to you about. Bryce had a seizure when he was 10, and this Peyton came right over, and he wanted to sit and sleep with him, and he drew art pictures for him, and he sticks up for him when they go to dances, and all kinds of young adults that he had. And that's why we decided when we were looking at community living is I didn't want to move out of our smaller community and move to the big city so that we could find community supported living. And that was the point. They're like, well, why don't you just go here? There's a bus line and there's all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, well, I would like to help young adults be connected in our community. And so that's where my mission started. And Patti Becker came 10 years ago to talk about what is affordable housing, what is supported living, and I've been working with families and grants ever since, and we still don't have affordable housing in my community. So I'm just giving you the little red flag that it takes work, and I think starting with what does your community do for developments is a really big piece. So here, I did want to say that each community has their own profile of affordable housing. So it's not realistic to think that when they step out the door at 21, they can go knock on a door and say, hi, I have a Section 8 waiver and I'd like to live here. Because my son's 28 and we still don't have a place for him to live. So there's a lot of work to be done, and that's why we're speaking here at this conference, because we want to make sure that you guys understand there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of advocacy to partake in order to make their futures so much better and brighter. So the relationships that I want to talk about, others see value in your person and help our kids belong. My older son was a Boy Scout, and so I decided Bryce would be a Boy Scout, and basically he did Scouts till he was done with high school, and there are actually special needs programs for Boy Scouts that actually can go on to be Eagle Scouts, and he had such a connection because then he got to walk in the parade every year as well. And so it didn't take him anything, but even in middle school, he made popcorn for the staff, he put the flag up with the custodian, he sold things at the store, and his IQ is quite low. So it didn't matter. He felt connected, and that's all I wanted out of middle school for him, was that he felt connected, and he still is connected today. I would just reiterate to embrace any of the concepts of self-determination and the home and community-based settings legislation. Attend the self-determination conference, which we were all at a few weeks ago, and it's very motivating, especially for the young adults or other people with disabilities, to understand what advocacy is and how they can help. Anything else on that? Also to remember that when you are in the IEP process focuses on weaknesses, but when you get to that transition program, it should focus on strengths. And so I think, just to reiterate, that to work as a school team, parent team, DVR person, other family members who come to the IEPs, remember that you really are setting goals, wanting them to actually step into something when they leave. Because that future, looking at their potential, maximizing it, looking at their strengths and their desires, is something that really needs to be seen. And the last thing is, if you are an advocate of supported living and you want to bring affordable housing to your community, or you want to help support the cause, be ready for Not in My Backyard. At the Haase house, I just needed to buy a house to teach life skills. I went through 9 months of discrimination lawsuits just to get the house. There's no room for that in my neighborhood on the news, okay? I went to churches to have listening sessions and was just yelled at by people in the neighborhood about how their grandchildren are in danger and we better put up a fence, and you're talking intellectual disabilities. And so if you don't think that's real, it still is real, and that's why we're encouraging you to look at your community that you live in and kind of get that vibe.
Yeah, like in my slide too, it's like get involved. Whenever there's a public hearing on a development, even if you can't impact the development, you need to show up and give comment saying, oh, here's another beautiful development. We need housing for our citizens who have disabilities, for our students who are graduating from our school district, those kinds of things.
And they need it now for workforce development.
Right. And actually, that's been a great, in our community, that's been a really great avenue, is actually just last week. Our transition program has been community-based for quite a long time. They had an apartment in the community. Well, it's very cool. They moved to the mall. The mall's kind of getting a little not so whatever. They had a facility that there was a separate entrance. And our school district moved our transition program into the mall, and they did all this work ahead of time. So they're going to be working with all the employers in the mall for jobs for our students. And because I've, advocated at the school level and I, know the people there for so many years, they invited me when they had an open house. And I said, could I bring somebody? I said, could I bring my alderperson who is on the planning planning commission? And so then I contacted him. He's like, heck yeah, I'll be there. He said, can I bring the mayor? I was like, well, let me ask. So we brought the mayor, I brought my alderperson, and we brought the director of, development from the community, the person who, goes around and kind of sells our community to developers. And they came, wow, they couldn't believe what we were doing in our school district. And then we talked about how, look at this untapped workforce. Mm-hmm. And boy, did that get our mayor's attention. He was like, oh. And then I said, but we have no place for them to live. They're going to have these jobs, but there's no place for them to live. So it was a really good segue into the housing thing. So we're going to go through kind of how, providing support to people who live independently is really the problem. It's really, really hard to find good support. And we're just going to go through some of the things that we do. Mary, you're an agency-based supporter, so she's going to talk about what they do.
Okay. So basically,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay. Basically, you guys know what an agency would be like. I'm the nonprofit. I hire the staff. I train my staff. I know the young adults, and I think I know them. I know what their self-determination is. I know what their desires are. I work on instruction the whole time in life skills, so that if they're ready to move in the community, to go take a YMCA class, let's try to figure out how to get them there. So again, all of the positives that we talked about having a place of your own, as an agency-based service, we want our young adults, we want the Haase House to be a stepping stone, not a place you come to for the rest of your life, so your parents can have respite. We do want them to come to the Haase House. We want to maximize their own potential, and then move them to whatever community-supported living situation is best. And then we want to make sure that we help design those support services. And I think that's the key, is that it's important as educators and professionals that you really know them as a very whole person and are able to give the recommendations for moving them out into supported living. Because I think, like everyone worries, well, what should they do at night? My kid can't sit there at night. He has to have somebody there. Well, we're running the fire drill practice, and we're doing it in 18 to 29 different ways, and we still can't get them to yell fire. So, so when you think you need to know those kinds of things, can they run out of the house if there's a fire? Can they dial the phone? If they cannot, we need to be able to say those things. So we do need to know. And so really this is just what it's about. It's about the parent doesn't have to be the case manager. The parents, you guys have been advocating, the teachers have been advocating for years and years, their caregivers have, and our families are growing old while their children are growing old. They look to an agency or a support service to be that person, to do that paperwork, to make that calls, to provide the transportation, to look at what's really needed in their lives, because as parents, we're a little blind. We get used to our kids, even when they're 28 years old, and we overlook a lot of stuff that we should not be overlooking. And, my staff will look at me, and my son's in my program, and I just have to walk by and go, you better take care of that, because I know that the reality is that us as special needs families, we create an environment in our homes and in our community so that things go smoothly. And we have to really encourage other families to work through that and work out of that and help them be independent.
All right. So this is one option for getting support for your loved one. If you can find a great agency like Haase House, have at it. So it's really, there aren't a lot of agencies out there that provide, maybe the care you want. So you really have to look, but if you find a good one, it's wonderful, and this is a really great way to go. It's very sustainable. What we're part of, my family, about 12 years ago, we brought together a group of families. There are 7 families with 8 individuals with disabilities, and we formed a family governed group. And we're a corporation. We're not a service provider. We are a family group. And when we were talking about, when Jennifer was talking about support, what we look at is we have our 8 individuals, and we have the 7 families around those 8 individuals, and each family member brings with them this incredible amount of connections and things, right? So we have that. And then what we're doing is we are also training our next in line guardians. Like my son, the siblings, who's ever going to take over after the parents are no longer there. What we do is we leverage our resources. So I will tell you, whenever in the 10 years that we've been doing this, whenever there's an issue with one of the self-advocates, and they bring it to the group and they're like, we're really having a problem with this. It could be, a mental health problem. It could be a job. It could be a housing issue. When we all put our heads together and we all dig into our networks, we have been able to solve a lot of these problems. The one thing that is really beautiful about this is that we have hired somebody that's called a family coordinator. So that person is a high-level person who gets to know all of our self-advocates and our families. And all of us do things differently. Every family in the group handles things a little differently for their self-advocate. And each self-advocate has different dreams and different issues and different whatever. It's the job of that person to know how we do it. She helps us hold the vision. She helps us keep our goals intact, because it's really easy as a parent to go down rabbit holes and to get so overwhelmed with scheduling and hiring and things like that. And one of the lovely things that we started doing is our self-advocates, when we're hiring workers, we use IRIS. So we've decided that rather than an agency, we like to tailor. It just works better for us to hire our own workers. But what we found is that for Catherine, maybe she only needs 5 hours of support a week for something. But we find this great worker who wants 25 hours. So what we do is we hire that person. Our family coordinator says, when she's interviewing them, I think you would be a good fit for these 3 families. And then she pulls us and says, hey, how many hours do you need? I have this worker. And then we all interview them. Our self-advocates interview them. And then we divide up the hours. So we give that person the 25 hours they want. And if something happens, one of the kids are sick, or a family's going on vacation, or like Catherine was at a conference on one of the days she had a worker, we're able to say, well, Catherine's not going to be there. Dakota was going to work with her for 5 hours. Who could use her that day? So that Dakota has her fixed hours. So it works really, really well. And that's what we do, is we're always looking for community connections. But it's a lot of work, and it's maybe not for every family. So then we go to the next one. There's another thing, it's called a microboard. Now, family governed, we're the only family governed group in Wisconsin as far as I know. Okay, and microboards, and it's not well defined what a family governed group is, so you can kind of do whatever you want with it. A microboard is, what? It's novel. And if anyone is interested, anyone wants it, my contact information is, in the stuff. Call me. We'd be happy, our group would be happy to talk to you. But a microboard, now this is kind of an international concept. There is actually in Canada, there's a group, and it's a thing. It's a type of thing that it's a nonprofit corporation. They have a board of directors, and it is around one person. So a family puts together a microboard, and it's around their person. Their person is a board member. They have board people who are usually some relatives, community members, and that they leverage resources between all these board members to keep that person's life rich and cared for, and it's people that make sure that everything's taken care of. But it's also a business. A microboard is an agency, and parents choose this, especially for they're self-advocates with high needs, high health, high service needs, because then they can hire their own workers. They employ them. They don't have to worry about, submitting paperwork or doing anything. And then that's pretty much what a microboard is. And then, do you want to do the individual? Okay, individual employer is basically, if you use IRIS, you are your own individual employer. And the state sets up the program that you have an IRIS consultant that helps you with your plan, lets you know what is a Medicaid expense, what you can, get provided. And then we have a fiscal agent. Those are that would be a company that processes your applications and pays your employees. Okay, and provides you with financial information. You get a monthly statement that tells you where you are in your budget. Yep.
Just to make sure it would be like my son Bryce would have his own worker. And
Yeah.
he's their boss.
Yeah. Yes. That's. See, to me, this is the essence of humanity and dignity. Is Catherine? We're doing IRIS, and we built Family Govern so that she can maintain self-direction. So she will always be in the driver's seat for her life. Okay, and that's, but it's a lot of work being an individual director. You don't have like an agency. If someone calls in sick, the agency finds somebody else and gets somebody over there. That doesn't happen when you are your own employer. You call a friend, a family or a friend. Come, can you get me out of bed today, or can you drive me here? So, next one. Am I handling this? Okay. Resources and where? What are, we've gone through this. These are the different housing options. There aren't a lot of really good ones. That's all I can tell you. And there aren't, even the ones that aren't that good, there's not many of them. And they're all full. And if you have high needs, if you have behavioral needs, if you have a lot of medical needs, it's harder and harder and harder and harder. It's impossible. And the quality is not good. It's a crisis. It is absolutely a crisis. And here are some valuable resources, places that you can call. And again, in the case stuff, I think our contact information is in there. It isn't? Okay. Anybody else? Does anyone have questions about this? Yes. Yeah, yeah.
So does this family coordinator that you hired, do they act as sort of like an oversight? Like, is that the oversight individual, like, not assuming anything will go wrong?
Yes.
If something does,
Right.
that's the person that makes sure it is set up?
Yeah, what it is right now, all the parents in our group are involved. We are basically training our family coordinator. Oh, repeat the question. She wanted to know about our family govern group and about our family coordinator, and basically, is that person the one who kind of oversees everything? And basically, right now, the parents are pretty much all involved, but so far, we've lost 2 parents in our group, because we're all in our 60s. So we're, yes, the reason for doing this and having a family coordinator is that none of us expect our other children to do the work that we're doing. It's not sustainable. When I talk to my son and about this family government, it's like, Andrew, I'm doing this as much for you as I'm doing it for Catherine, because your life is not going to be what I'm living. You're going to have your own life. And yes, the family coordinator is kind of the very high-level person, and they look at what's going on with each person, and then they're the ones to help us. Right now, the parents do a lot of it, but to help us hire the support and to get the support and make the connections and check in on employment. It's like safeguarding people's valued roles.
I might have missed it on their list of resources, but you guys ever deal with Chapter 42 housing?
The question was, do we ever deal with Chapter 42 housing? Yes, we would love to deal with Chapter 42 housing. We just need Chapter 42 housing. Yeah, there are different things. Section 42 housing is really interesting. There isn't much of it. Developers don't really know how to get the funding. It's really hard. I mean, Haase can really talk to that. But usually, Section 42 housing can be very interesting because it has to be a percentage of people with disabilities so that they live in a fully integrated community. There has to be walkable things. It has to have access to transportation. It's really lovely. Like, you have to be able to walk to a grocery store, to a library. Section 42 housing, even though maybe it doesn't work right for you, I think is... Yeah, the income requirements are high. Right. Okay, well, I think that I would like to see more of it so we can deal with those issues. Section 42 housing, I'd really like to see more of that personally. But yeah, advocate for that. Talk to your legislator about how this doesn't work.
One of the challenges we had with Section 42 housing is that the tax break isn't, they just rather not anybody know about it.
Right.
And leave the unit vacant.
Right.
But they use the tax break.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where it's really good if there are people that live there, and if you're connected to other families, connected to agencies, you give them that information, and you say, hey, I mean, I'll tell you, between my daughter's friends and connections, I could fill up every Section 42 house there is available in the state. All of us could. So
Yeah, I've had people call from the county and say, well, Mary, if you could just get a 60-unit thing ready, we'll fill it up tomorrow with anybody for mental health. Okay, well, that's not easy to do. Also, writing grants. I found out that in my community they don't write any grants at the community level. So maybe that's why we don't have affordable housing. I also called the housing authority for our county like 10 years ago, and they said, I said, well, why isn't there any adult family home or any supported living or anything in my community? And they said, well, nobody asked. So that was a mind blower for me. Nobody asked, no parent asked. So that's why there wasn't any. So
I want to leave you with one thing for the student, to pick that one next step. So wherever they are right now, what's the one next thing that you could do? Or pick a new experience that they could have. Or start a relationship with someone in your community. What is that end goal going to look like? Where do you want them to be? Is it that, they're going to require more support, they have more support needs and they may need to be in a place like Haase House or a day program. That's where my daughter is, because there is no other options for her, because otherwise she will be in my home 24/7, and that will not be a good thing for me or her. Or maybe it's work. Maybe they're going to be going to a college, a WCTC, or a community college, or maybe going to a full college. Maybe they're looking to start a micro business. Anyone can do that, any person. So I want you to think of one thing, write it down on your piece of paper, circle it, and that's the one thing you're going to do this next week. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? And you can talk with us after if you have questions. We need your information up there, Julie, for them if they need to get a hold of you.
If anyone
And
wants
thank you
a
very
copy
much.
of this, I'm happy to send it to you. If you want to give me your email, or you can take my email. I just put my email and my phone number up there. Yeah, you can like our Facebook page, Inclusive Living Possibilities. Thank you, Haase. Haase too.